I might just open up to the others who are joining us on a quick panel discussion. And we have a couple of questions in the chat around projected canopy coverage percentage and using rear-loaded, the laneways, capacity for granny flats above the garages. So I might get some comments on those, and then we'll look at some other questions that have come in.
So I'll jump in. Hello.
Sure.
In terms of canopy cover percentage, I'm not quite sure what the actual percentage is, but generally in most streets, they're 5 metre intersections between each tree. And it's made so that the canopy, so that the trees will join over the streets and over the footpaths. But I don't know the exact percentage. In terms of the rear loaded, it was interesting at the time that the developer was doing the rear loaded and wanting to stay with the rear loaded design. A lot of developers in Perth were pulling them out. Interestingly enough, it was considered at that time, and this was probably maybe about 10 years ago. A lot of developers were seeing it as a cost that they didn't want to take on, and so a lot went to back to front loaded. And I think that when you look back on that, I don't think I think the approach of the rear loaded in terms of it's the cost is actually saved in the walkability. So they're saved around health, the health of the residents. And so not just the engineering costs, there's greater benefits. Yeah. I can't remember the other one that you said. What was the other one that was on the chat?
No, that was the granny flats. Yeah.
Okay. The granny flats. As of right, granny flats. Across Western Australia now, you can do ancillary accommodation and granny flats, but certainly within the GIND code, that's an integral part to that. That is an as of right ancillary accommodation.
So it's certainly something we want to encourage. It helps with that surveillance of rear laneways from a safety perspective, but also helps with housing diversity.
It does, yeah. I'd like to go to a question that came from Simon Berryman from the NBN Co. And it was around how did you get this through when the asset maintenance costs are unknown? What's the risk there? And I'll tie in with that. How did you get your elected members across the line on this with all of these unknown costs going forward?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned, it's still one of the issues that we need to address. There was a lot of time and energy spent in sharing the vision of GIND through Roberts Day, through the developer. There was an innovation agreement in place. We deliberately wanted to challenge the norm. As I mentioned, I think there is an opportunity for us to do better in many instances, and GIND provides that opportunity. And in sharing, there's still a concern around the cost. There is no doubt higher cost in delivering GIND in terms of landscaping, in terms of some of the civil construction, but I think it's worth it. I think it absolutely does provide a really high quality environment, and it's still only in its infancy. We've got so much more of development to come, but no doubt there will be a need for specified area rates, and the residents that live there will benefit from a higher quality residential environment, and the city will be able to afford to deliver a standard level of maintenance, but beyond that, there will be a need for some support from the residents that enjoy that environment.
Thanks. And just a final quick question there about walkability. We've seen all the great thoroughfares, but commercial centres, local shops, things like that. What's the proximity?
It's located. GIND is very lucky in that it's located. The train line that goes north of Perth ends 800 metres away from GIND. So it is proposed to be extended further, but it is very, very close, and also it sits right next to a district centre called the Butler District Centre. So it's in terms of its location, it's fantastic for not just walkability within GIND, but further afield. And I know that when I go up to GIND, I live near the city. I jump on the train with my bike. I go up to Butler, and I ride down. It takes me about 3 minutes to ride down from the train station to Jindee to the sales office, and all up that's about 37 minutes. And so it's pretty similar to driving up there. So
I think just also point out that there is commercial development. There will be retail. There's a tourism node that's right on the coastal front. There's stages that are still to happen. It is very much in its infancy, but it's a very, very exciting project.
Yeah, so, Bronwyn, a couple of other points to add too.
Sure.
So to Mark and Kath's points that they've raised, it's actually designated regional swimming beach as well. So as Mark's sort of saying, I think there's potential for 3 to 5 story mixed use buildings, and to the founder's credit, Fiona Roche, I think there was a land exchange, and obviously we haven't got time to go into detail, but Mark sort of touched on that the interface with the coaster and the fact that there's the trig point. So there's a land exchange, for east-west, because there was judged to be more floristic diversity east-west than there was north-south along the coast. So, and it went through both houses of parliament. So it's a long and protracted process. But as Mark's and Kath's saying, it's just really such a rewarding process. I also wanted to add too, on the notion of collaboration, council were bold in allowing Mark to go to the US and to have a look at the coastal communities. I think that was really important as well. Where some local authorities have got a little bit of a fear of their offices moving around the country or internationally. But I think that was instructive. The other thing is we didn't touch on the fact that there was a charrette that was convened, a 10-day charrette that Fiona convened, and we worked together closely with the American consultants, DPZ, that designed the coastal villages in Florida. But I think what was important is that we locally calibrated it in terms of the built form, which Mark and Kath have touched on. And it's instructive because there is a project that's underway or that's been proposed in Tasmania at the moment on the peninsula, the Tranmere Peninsula. And the full council from Clarence actually came over and visited Mark and the Mayor and the CEO, and Kath gave them a bit of an overview because they just needed a bit more confidence that they could design with a coastal vernacular that was of the place. Because again, the plan that they've had prepared was prepared by the Americans. One other point too is Fiona, the town founder, was laid out a community called Harbour Rise, which is opposite the Hillary's Marina, and that was sort of it's an incremental change. I think getting the builders to move away from the sort of the Tuscan villas that were commonplace in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. She got them to work together with the builders, and Shani Howe and a few other, and Julie Harold, who's the town architect. They worked very closely with the builders to get them to develop a coastal form of architecture, as Mark said, that was more in keeping with that coastal setting. And then to the point on the lot size or the rear loading, the greatest advantage is, in addition to what Kath is sort of saying, you get the canopy that touches, but we're reclaiming the frontage streets for pedestrians and you're bringing the house closer to the street. So you've got almost a 0 or 1 metre front setback. So you're not wasting land, which we do with the conventional setbacks. The other thing is the builders are telling me in Melbourne that they're spending between $6,000 and $8,000 on the driveways. So once you factor that in, the laneways aren't really that, there's not much of a cross differential, and there is the opportunity for this much.
There's not,
No, and there's so much more opportunity, particularly as we talked about earlier, was these studios above the garage or the granny flats, I think, is a viable form of affordable housing. As Kath's saying, I've been out a couple of times with Kath when she's ridden a bike back. If we've got everyone riding around electric bikes and micromobility, then I think it's a viable alternative to people having 2 cars.
Fabulous. That's just great. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Mike, Kath and Mark. I would really encourage anyone who's ever in Perth to go and have a look, because it really is beautiful, and I'd love to think that this sort of innovation in a growth area is something that could be rolled out across the country, and I'm sure Mark will be happy to provide some advice on how to do that. But thank you all very much, and we really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that wraps up the focus on the northern suburbs of Perth.